Yeah, we still call these whiteboard reviews, even though I'm using a blackboard, the old blackboard and chalk, OS2 Linux. So right now, installing Apache web services. Now we have a hard time testing that, but you should be able to install that. And then you should have it set up so the users can have their own web page. The users should be able to access MySQL and create a database. And we haven't installed it yet, but they could have PHP so that they could simulate a little bit of this full stack environment for web. Okay, the front and back end of web presence, right? Yeah, see, and then we could use the PHP to create forms to write and retrieve from a MySQL database. And of course, there's all kinds of Wix and WordPress and Squarespace. There's lots of opportunities to create web presence out there other than your own, but there is value even if you're using one of these to understand how the process works. Plus, it's good for you to set yours up so the users have those opportunities. Here we go, some more. We talked a little bit about file systems. Operating systems figure out how to read and write information to a disk. And so I mentioned briefly we have, let's say if we have multiple platters, inside a hard drive. Now this would be magnetic as an example. And then we have on there tracks, and we divide those tracks up into sectors, and we can group them into clusters. Somehow it has to keep track of where that information is. So we do have metadata, this information about the data, and the data actually written to the disk. Years ago we started out with the old DOS, FAT, and then they have FAT32, and now we have new technology file system, NTFS, and Linux has file systems it wants to use. And so like this my data, I went to town, binary, we put some code, we use ASCII code to represent it, and those ones and zeros are represented on the disk, and we have to be able to keep track of where everything is. So we have a file allocation table that allows us to access that information. Nowadays, magnetic or flash SSD type storage. So users, you're supposed to have all the students in the class, users on your system. Some of you have all of them, some of you have some of them. But for an example, if Jason, he should be able to log into Jacob's computer and then have somewhere's files where we're going to create a file that's going to explain to Jason how to log into his account. And to do that, I thought this wasn't a bad idea. We could use the class user, so all those should exist on everybody's accounts, right? And this is the password we use at the beginning. And a couple different ways you could log into there, but what you'll do is you'll log in, and in there will be a file, right? Jason's going to log into Jacob's computer, and Jacob's going to put a file in there that Jason can open up and see the credentials to log into his account. And then he can change his password because people will see the generic password, the first one to log in. Okay? Now, you could test that from your machine where the stuff is, or from Work Server 2 you could log in. And then from that home directory, you're going to make it obvious where your information is for your people to log in. And somebody says, well, what's the IP addresses? Well, they start at 101 and go to 117. And there's a couple in there that aren't working. 101 works, but there's no person putting any files in that. And if you think about it, we went around the classroom. 101's over here, front corner. So I think Jason then is probably 102. I think Jonathan is 103 maybe. But anyway, then we just went around and numbered everybody in the classroom. All right. So then, yeah, this is, I guess this is a repeat slide from the one before. Bad. Last slide then. Yeah. So this is, we had a lot of time to work. I thought we had, maybe you didn't think so, but we reviewed the users, their web page. They should be able to use a database. I would encourage people to use Maria for their MySQL database. There are other options so that install it, and then the users should be able to access the database. And in class, in the skills outline, I can write it up here. In the skills outlines near the beginning of the modules, if you've never seen it, yeah, it'd be kind of question where you've been at in the course, but there's that. And if you search on MySQL, you'll find a bunch of hits, and if you work down through those, you'll find some older information on how to install. So I wouldn't follow that exactly, but if you look it up for your particular distribution, okay, your distro or whatever you want to call it, it should explain to you how it works. And so I went through and showed how I put it on the one machine, and we reset the root password here, and so I believe I installed it on that Fedora machine. You should have in your notes how to access it, end user. This is 121, and it's NIAC. I think this is the same password to get in the machine. All right. Well, next week we wrap this all up, this part, and we start looking at how we'll finish out the last 3 weeks of the class. That's it.